The wind came down from the mesa dry and bitter, dragging dust like old ghosts through the narrow streets of Hart's Hollow. Sunlight lanced off broken church glass. The saloon porch creaked with the weight of idle men and rumors. And just past noon, a black horse rode in with a coffin strapped behind the saddle. The rider was tall, broad-shouldered, and quiet as sin. His duster was soaked dark with blood, not fresh, the kind that had dried through grief and miles. One hand on the reins, the other resting on a worn coat. His face was leathered, jaw tight. A thick scar crept from the corner of his eye down his cheek, like a tear that never fell. The horse staggered to a stop in front of the undertaker's. Folks stared, but no one stepped forward. Not until Doc Amos, half drunk and full of curiosity, wandered out from the saloon with a wet cough and squinted up at the stranger. "Reckon she die hard?" the doc asked, tipping his hat toward the coffin. The man didn't answer right away. He dismounted, boots thudding on dry earth. His name was Jesse Calder, a rancher from out near the Salt Fork who hadn't been seen in town in nearly 2 years. Folks used to call him Lucky. Good land, pretty wife. No enemies loud enough to spit. But that was before the fire, before the baby, before everything went quiet. He turned and unslung the coffin. Cracked oak, ropes frayed from days of travel. He set it down gentle as a cradle and ran a hand along the lid. "Need a place to bury her," Jesse said, his voice low, almost reverent. The doc frowned. "Up in Boot Hill, I suppose. But she ain't cold yet. Waited all night. Figured this town owed her a grave at the least." Doc Amos knelt and pressed a hand to the wood. Then something happened that made his blood turn. A faint knock. Slow. Hollow. Then again. "What in God's?" the doc muttered. Jesse dropped to his knees, unlatched the coffin, and threw the lid open. Inside lay a woman. Skin pale as bone, lips cracked, dress bloodstained and torn from the waist down. But her chest moved. Barely. A whisper of breath and a flicker beneath her bruised eyelids. And when Jesse leaned in close, she turned her face just slightly toward the light. "Lydia," he breathed, "you're still with me." The street fell silent, like even the sky held its breath. They carried her to the doc's back room. The townsfolk watched from windows and behind curtains, whispering like chickens before a storm. "I sewed her up best I could," Doc Amos said, washing blood from his hands. "She lost too much. Someone meant to kill her. Gave her just enough to die slow. If you hadn't rode her in when you did..." Jesse sat on the edge of a chair, hat in his hands, staring at the woman on the cot. Her face, once full of song and summer mischief, was now sunken and strange. But he'd know her anywhere. "They said she was dead," Jesse whispered. Doc Amos glanced over. "Who did?" Jesse's jaw worked. "Her kin. Them I left her with. Back then, after the fire took their baby and the ranch went dry, Jesse had headed north to work the mines, trying to build back what was lost. Lydia stayed with her sister's family in Cross Tree Canyon. She wrote for a while. Then she stopped. The letters never came. When he returned, her folks said she died in a fever. Buried fast. No headstone. No preacher. Nothing. But Jesse didn't believe it. Not really. So he dug. And there she wasn't. That night, lightning bloomed over the mesa like distant cannon fire. Rain spat like nails on the tin roof. Jesse kept vigil by Lydia's bedside, Colt resting in his lap. She stirred once, murmuring something he couldn't catch. Downstairs in the saloon, old Jack Carver poured cheap whiskey and whispered to Sheriff Waylon Briggs, who looked like he hadn't slept since the war. "Heard Calder come dragging a coffin through the dust," Carver said. "Said his dead wife weren't so dead. You buy that." Waylon spat into a tin. "I buy trouble when I see it." "She had kin over in Cross Tree," Carver added. "Folks say her cousin's boy, Willard Greaves. He's been running rough lately. Fast with a knife, faster with a girl." Waylon nodded slowly. "Tell the boys to stay sharp. If she wasn't dead, somebody wanted her that way." Morning broke slow, dragging gray light across Lydia's face. Her eyes fluttered open. She tried to speak, coughed, then swallowed hard. Jesse leaned close. "You're safe," he said. "You're home." Her eyes locked with his. "You shouldn't have come." Why? He asked, voice cracking. Who did this to you? She turned her face away. They'll kill you, too. A knock rattled the front door of the clinic. Doc Amos cracked it. Sheriff Briggs stepped inside, hat damp with rain. Need to speak with Calder, he said. Jesse came down slow, every step heavy. The sheriff looked him over, eyes landing on the blood on Jesse's cuffs. The gun on his belt. You bring trouble with you, Jesse? Jesse's voice was calm. I brought my wife. She ain't supposed to be breathing, Whalen said, folded his arms. Word is she died last year. No records. No doctor's note. But now she's here, sliced and near dead. Which means someone lied, Jesse replied. Whalen nodded. Which means we got questions. About who wanted her gone. And why. Jesse said nothing, just looked toward the stairs. Then, from behind the clinic, a horse screamed. Gunshots cracked through the morning like dry branches snapping. Jesse dove to the window. A shadow moved in the alley, fast, hunched, then gone. Smoke curled from the barn. Whalen cursed and ran out into the street. Jesse followed, but the shooter was already gone, boot prints fading into mud. The only thing left behind was a warning nailed to the back wall. Bury the dead, or join them. Later that day, as Lydia slipped into fevered sleep again, Jesse sat outside under the wide porch, watching the storm break on the horizon. The air was thick with rot and secrets. He lit a match, held it to the corner of an old, faded letter from her cousin's house. It burned slow, curling around the words. She's better off gone. The ashes blew into the street. The wind shifted, not in speed, in tone. It carried the scent of blood and creosote, the weight of vengeance rising from the land like steam after a flash flood. Jesse Calder spent the next 2 nights sleeping on the floor beside Lydia's cot. Coat a hand, never once letting his boots leave the clinic. Doc Amos did what he could. Poultices, boiled cloth, whiskey to dull the fever. But it wasn't just her wounds that held her between life and death. It was a fear in her chest, the memory in her skin. She woke once, long enough to whisper, "He wore father's watch after he killed him." Jesse froze. She blinked. Willard. Willard Greaves. Her cousin's boy. Trouble in spurs. Mean as a bull and twice as dumb, until it came to cruelty. Jesse had never liked him, but now the pieces started sliding into place like a loaded chamber. Lydia hadn't just been left behind. She'd been taken. Sheriff Whalen wasn't the kind of man who acted on emotion, but even he saw the truth in Jesse's face. So he rode with him to Cross Tree Canyon. The trail was mean. Storm-dampened gullies carved the land like scars. Coyotes howled even in daylight. A hawk circled above them for half the ride. Whalen called it a bad omen. By dusk, they came upon what remained of the Greaves homestead, torched down to stone and ash, bones in the chicken pen, bullet holes in the porch post, and something darker painted along the barn wall in a child's handwriting. She screamed. He laughed. Whalen crossed himself. Jesse didn't. They found an old man in the ravine below, Uncle Leroy Greaves, cradling a shotgun and talking to ghosts. His hands trembled, knuckles bloody from clawing at the dirt. Said Willard had gone wild since the army turned him out. Said Lydia had tried to run, that she hid in the hills before they dragged her back. Kept her like a broken filly, Leroy mumbled. Wouldn't let no one near. Said she was his now. Jesse nearly pulled his gun right there, but Whalen stopped him. They left Leroy with a bottle and a prayer. The next morning, Jesse rode out alone before the law could catch up. The truth didn't need a badge. It needed reckoning. Snow had begun to crust the high trails. The sun was a pale coin in a sky turning silver. Somewhere beyond those hills, Willard Greaves was hiding, armed, unstable, and still thinking Lydia was his to claim. Jesse found his unlikely guide near the base of Red Elk Ridge, a man folks called Jonas Three Toes, a Ute scout with a face like dried riverbed and eyes that never blinked. Some said he once served as a tracker for the U.S. Cavalry before they turned on his people. He didn't talk much, just listened, then pointed west. They camped 3 days, Jonas rasped, built a cage for her. Then fire came. He ran east. Toward the border? Jesse asked. No, Jonas said. Toward the canyon where coyotes birth their young. No law goes there. Jesse nodded once. They rode together in silence, and Jesse came to realize Jonas didn't follow tracks. He followed grief, the kind buried beneath footprints. Meanwhile, back in Hart's Hollow, Lydia opened her eyes again. She asked for water, then for paper. Her hand trembled, but she wrote, each word a wound. He killed my father. He branded me. He said Jesse would never find me. Doc Amos wept when he read it. Sheriff Whalen gathered a posse, 2 deputies and a preacher who'd fought at Cold Harbor, and followed Jesse's trail into the canyonlands. But by then, Jesse had found him. Willard Greaves lived in a shanty shack hidden beneath the overhang of Widow's Hollow, a place where sun rarely reached and voices echoed strange. His horse was tied out front. Fresh kill hung from a hook, and on the door, carved into wood, was the name Lydia. Jesse didn't wait for nightfall. He stepped into clearing like a man walking into church, slow, unflinching, ready to meet God or the devil. Willard stepped out the door shirtless, pistol in hand, grinning like a skull. He wore Lydia's locket around his neck, the one Jesse gave her on their wedding day. Look what wandered in, Willard said, licking his teeth. The faithful dog. Come for scraps. Came for what's mine, Jesse said. Willard raised his gun, but Jesse was faster. The shot hit Willard high in the shoulder, spinning him backward into the shack. He screamed, not in pain, but fury, and came out firing. Jesse Dove rolled, came up behind a stone pillar, bullets kicking up dust around him. Jonas crept like smoke through the shadows. Then from behind, struck Willard hard with the butt of his rifle. Willard dropped to his knees. Jesse approached, gun trained steady. Willard spat blood, laughing. She screamed your name. I made sure of it. Jesse didn't speak. He just pulled the locket from Willard's neck and stepped back. Jonas said, What now? Jesse stared down at the trembling man who had stolen his life, shattered his wife, and tried to bury the past beneath silence. He cocked the Colt. She'll decide. Back in Hart's Hollow, they laid Willard on a cot in the jailhouse, bandaged but breathing. Lydia stood in the doorway, pale and frail, wearing a borrowed shawl. Her eyes locked on his, and for a long time she said nothing. Then, softly, He doesn't die here. Jesse frowned. You sure? I want him to rot. Behind bars. In the dark, where no one will speak his name. Whalen nodded. We'll see to it. But fate had its own justice. That night, the townsfolk gathered in the square, torches burning. They'd heard enough, and they wanted blood. The preacher tried to hold them back, but the rope came quick. By dawn, the jail was empty, and Willard's body swung from the old cottonwood near the church. Lydia didn't cry. She simply took Jesse's hand and walked out to the cemetery, where a hole had already been dug. Not for her, for who she used to be. They buried the old locket there, along with the memories, the silence, the guilt. Jesse placed his saddle by the grave. Never rode that horse again. The morning after the hanging, Hart's Hollow was quieter than it had been in years. The saloon piano sat silent. Church bells didn't ring. Even the dogs didn't bark. It was as if the town itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what kind of story would be told in the dust that remained. Lydia stood beneath the cottonwood tree, staring up at the body, not out of vengeance, not out of relief, just silence, the kind that comes after too many screams. I didn't want this, she whispered. Jesse stood beside her, weathered hat pressed to his chest. I know. She glanced at him. You would have pulled the trigger, wouldn't you? He didn't answer, just nodded once. A hard, honest nod. Sheriff Whalen came out from the jail, face taut with shame. I locked that door. Swore I'd keep him alive. But someone had other plans. We all did, Jesse muttered. In one way or another. Lydia turned away. I want to leave this place. They packed by noon. Nothing fancy. Just supplies, water, her old shawl, and a Bible with a bullet dent in the spine. The same one Jesse carried with him through the war. He kept it over his heart, said it had saved him once. Maybe it had. Before they could mount, a voice called out from the edge of town. A boy, no more than 12, dirty face, one boot, holding something wrapped in canvas. Jesse approached him slow. "You lost, son." The boy shook his head. "Got something she left behind." He handed the bundle to Lydia. She peeled back the canvas. Inside was a folded letter, blood-specked but legible, her father's handwriting. The last letter he ever wrote. "Lydia, if you find this, or someone finds you, know I did all I could to stop him. But I was old. He was quick. I told Jesse to come. I hope he does. He's the only one who ever saw you for who you are. He'll do what I couldn't." She clutched the letter to her chest. Jesse reached out, touched her shoulder, then said to the boy, "What's your name?" "Thomas." "You got kin?" "Not no more." Jesse looked to Lydia. She didn't hesitate. "Come with us." The boy's eyes widened. "You mean that? You ever shot a rifle?" Jesse asked. "Only at tin cans." "You'll do fine." They rode out that evening, Jesse, Lydia, and Thomas, heading west toward the flatlands, where the horizon burned like an open wound and the wind still remembered stories. But the land had one final trial in mind. Just past Widow's Wash, a thunderhead cracked the sky in half. Rain slammed down. Horses bucked. The trail turned to clay. Lightning struck a cottonwood not 20 yards from their wagon. The tree split, burning from the inside, branches crashing across the road. Jesse jumped down to clear the path, boots sinking into mud. That's when the shot rang out. Crack! He stumbled. Blood blossomed from his side. Another shot grazed the wagon frame. Ambush! Outlaws! 3 of them. Maybe more. Hired hands. Greaves' men, no doubt, trying to finish what Willard couldn't. Paid to silence Lydia forever. Jesse crawled behind a fallen log, firing blind. Lydia grabbed the rifle from under the bench, passed it to Thomas. "You stay here," she told him. "If they get past us, run." Thomas nodded, shaking. She jumped down, musket in hand, eyes hard as iron. The woman who'd once been caged was gone. In her place stood something carved from survival. Crack! One of the outlaws dropped. Jesse pulled himself to the side, sighted another, squeezed off a shot. Missed. His vision blurred. Lydia took the next one. Square in the chest. The last man turned to flee. He didn't make it far. A 4th shot from behind. Thomas. The boy had fired. His hands trembled. "I didn't mean to." He was running. Lydia knelt and took the rifle gently from his grip. "You saved us." They camped beneath the stars that night. No more ambush. No more blood. Jesse lay with his shirt off, wound bandaged tight, breath shallow but steady. Lydia sat beside him, holding his hand. "You almost left me again," she whispered. "Didn't plan on it," he rasped. She smiled faintly. "You once said you'd follow me into hell." "I just did." They both laughed, a sound that hadn't passed between them in years. Thomas poked the fire. "You think we're going to make it?" Jesse looked to the boy. "We already did." By the time they reached the high country 2 weeks later, the snow had stopped. Flowers began to bloom in the valleys. They found an old homestead, abandoned but standing, a roof that didn't leak, a well that still ran clear. Jesse repaired the fence. Thomas learned to ride. Lydia planted bluebells near the porch. No one spoke much of the past. But every Sunday, she walked to the lone cottonwood by the hill, sat beneath it, read her father's letter one more time. Sometimes Jesse came with her. Sometimes he didn't. One day, she brought the old coffin lid, planted it in the earth, marked it with a stone, not for a body, for a memory. Epilogue. Years later, travelers spoke of a ranch nestled near the edge of the canyon, run by a scarred man, his quiet wife, and a boy who could shoot the wings off a crow. They said the man never raised his voice. But when he did speak, you listened. They said the woman healed the sick with herbs and prayers. They said the boy grew tall, joined the Rangers, and rode with a Bible and a rifle. And they said that every spring, the wife would bury something new beneath the cottonwood. A letter, a flower, a ring, a scrap of the past. Until one year, she didn't return. And the man sat beneath that tree alone, watching the horizon burn gold one last time.